If Sham had run the 1973 Kentucky Derby just 0.3 of a second slower, his name would be etched in racing history. But he was born in the year of Secretariat. His losing time would have won almost any other derby ever run. Everyone remembers the king, but almost no one tells the story of the horse who chased him into legend. The question is, how could such greatness be forgotten? Sham entered the world in 1970, a dark bay colt built for speed and stamina. He stood taller than most rivals, reportedly measuring 16.3 hands, just a shade above Secretariat's 16.2 hands. His coat was nearly black, his head broad and intelligent, and his shoulders deep and sloped for maximum reach. Even as a yearling, grooms noticed the length of his legs and the sweep of his stride. When he moved, he covered ground with an efficiency that seemed to defy the limits of his frame. Observers at Claiborne Farm remarked that he could eat up the track in great fluid bounds, each step a statement of raw potential. Beneath the surface, something extraordinary powered that motion. Trainers and riders sensed it in his workouts, in the way he finished gallops without a trace of fatigue. There was talk, even before science could confirm it, that Sham had inherited something rare, a heart that might be as much as double the size of the average thoroughbred. In the 1970s, the term super heart was whispered among horsemen, reserved only for the rarest of champions. Sham's endurance and recovery after races hinted at a biological engine far beyond the norm. His conformation records from the early stables catalogued a horse with remarkable proportions. His chest was wide, his girth deep, allowing for an enormous lung capacity. His cannon bones were thick, his joints clean and strong, and his hooves were hard and well-formed. Every physical detail, from the arch of his neck to the set of his hindquarters, suggested a horse bred not just to run, but to sustain speed over distance. Stride analysis from his training runs recorded a cadence that matched and sometimes exceeded the best of his era. When Sham opened up at full gallop, he could reach out with a stride that rivaled the length of Secretariat's. That was a feat few could claim. This combination of size, stride, and suspected heart power set him apart in a way that statistics alone could not capture. Before the world knew his name, Sham carried within him the makings of a champion, an athletic machine primed for the greatest tests the sport could offer. Sigmund Sommer came from the world of bricks and blueprints, not blue blood and racing dynasties. He built his fortune in New York real estate, a self-made man who saw horses as another kind of investment, one that could outpace the stock market if you found the right animal. Sommer was not interested in the glamour of the winner's circle. He was blunt, practical, and kept his own counsel, scribbling notes in ledgers and watching his horses with a builder's eye for structure and soundness. To him, Sham was a project worth every risk and dollar. Frank Pancho Martin, Sham's trainer, carried a different kind of ambition. Born in Cuba, he fled the Castro regime and rebuilt his life in the United States, clawing his way into the insular world of American racing. Martin's reputation was forged on the backstretch, tough, streetwise, and full of outsider grit. He distrusted the racing establishment, especially the East Coast aristocrats who dominated the sport's politics and press. Martin's approach was hands-on and relentless. He believed in hard work, not luck. He demanded respect for his horses and for himself, and he did not care if he had to ruffle feathers to get it. His confidence in Sham was absolute. After the Wood Memorial, when others doubted, Martin saw only opportunity. He had beaten Secretariat once. He believed he could do it again. In the saddle, Lafitte Pincay Jr. brought the muscle. Born in Panama, Pincay was already a rising star by the early 1970s, known for his strength and quiet determination. He was one of the few jockeys who could handle a horse as powerful as Sham. Pincay rode with the kind of force that matched his mount's raw energy. He did not just steer, he fought for every inch, using his legs and hands to coax, control, and sometimes wrestle a response. Pinkai's style was all business, no showboating, no wasted motion. He respected Shyam's aggression, even when it meant a busted lip in the winner's circle. Their partnership was built on trust, not sentiment. Together, this trio formed an unlikely alliance. The builder, the exile, and the strongman. They were not the darlings of the press or the favorites of the betting public, but they shared a single-minded drive to win and a willingness to defy convention. Summer's pragmatism, Martin's outsider grit, and Pinkai's physicality shaped every decision that lay ahead. In a sport ruled by tradition and pedigree, Shyam's team was ready to challenge the order, by force if necessary. Santa Anita in the spring of 1973 was a proving ground, not a stage. While the East Coast press was busy charting Secretariat's every move, Shyam was rewriting speed in California. In the Santa Anita Derby, he faced a field stacked with top-level colts, horses with Grade 1 credentials, horses who had never been outrun. Shyam did not just beat them. He ran away from them, crossing the wire in 1 minute, 47 seconds flat, equaling the track record. It was the kind of performance that should have set the racing world on notice. But the headlines out east barely registered his name. Frank Pancho Martin watched from the rail, arms folded, eyes narrowed under the brim of his hat. He knew what he had. Lafitte Pincay Jr. barely had to move his hands. Shyam did it all on his own. The colt's stride devoured the ground, each bound effortless, as if he were running downhill. When the numbers went up, Martin allowed himself a rare smile. He had seen horses win with less, then get crowned as Derby favorites. But here in California, the biggest warning shot of the season went mostly ignored. Shyam's temperament was never in question. He was all edge and attitude, a fighter, not a show horse. In the winner's circle that day, the aggression boiled over. Shyam tossed his massive head and slammed it straight into Pinkai's face, splitting the jockey's lip and sending blood down his chin. Pincay did not flinch. He just grinned through the pain, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. That moment, captured in a handful of grainy photos, said more than any press clipping. Shyam was not interested in applause. He was raw, untamed, and ready to fight anyone or anything that got in his way. The Santa Anita Derby should have been a coronation. Instead, it was a warning lost in the noise. The California circuit had its king, but the national spotlight stayed fixed on the East. For Pancho Martin and his team, it was fuel. They knew their colt was running times that would make him a legend in any other year. But the only way to prove it was to take on the so-called invincible on his own turf. The road would soon turn east, but in California, Shyam had already shown the world what greatness looked like, if only the world had bothered to watch. April 21st, 1973, Aqueduct Racetrack in New York. The Wood Memorial brought together the two colts everyone was talking about, Secretariat and Shyam, on the same track for the first time. The press called it a coronation for the red horse from Meadow Stable. Secretariat had swept the East Coast prep races, his picture already filling magazine covers. The grandstands swelled with reporters and racing insiders, their eyes fixed on the favorite. But Frank Pancho Martin stood in the paddock with a different kind of confidence. He did not have the crowd, but he had his horse. The race itself broke from expectation before the gates even opened. Secretariat, for all his hype, looked unsettled in the post-parade. Later, a veterinarian would discover a painful abscess under his lip. But no one knew it then. The bell rang. Angle Light, Secretariat's lesser-known stablemate, shot to the front. Shyam settled into a stalking position, his stride long and fluid, ears pinned back. Secretariat lagged behind, never firing. Down the backstretch, Shyam surged, eating up ground with every step. For a few heartbeats, it looked like the West Coast colt might seize the day. But Angle Light clung to the rail and refused to yield. Shyam chased relentlessly, finishing second by less than a length. Secretariat faded to third, beaten for the first time since his 2-year-old season. The headlines the next day blared the upset. Secretariat beaten. But buried in the columns was a quieter story. The California horse had run the better race. Martin's phone rang with new respect. For the first time, the East Coast establishment had to take Shams seriously. Pancho Martin did not hide his satisfaction. In interviews, he did not mince words. He said, "We beat the god once. We can do it again." The Wood Memorial changed the air around the Derby. Secretariat's invincibility was broken. Sham had proven he could not only keep up, but leave the champion behind on the right day. Martin's belief hardened into certainty. His horse had gone hoof to hoof with the favorite and finished in front. The road to Kentucky now shimmered with the possibility of an upset, and for the first time, the question was real. Had the world overlooked the true champion? May 5th, 1973. The morning of the Kentucky Derby began with trouble. In a routine schooling session at Churchill Downs, Sham reared and struck his head on the metal starting gate. The impact was brutal. 2 front teeth snapped off. Blood streamed from his mouth. His groom, shaken by the sight, later fainted at the volume of blood. There was no time for rest or repair. By post-time, Sham was saddled with a bleeding mouth, swallowing blood with every stride, pain radiating through his jaw. The starter's bell rang through the roar of more than 130,000 spectators. Sham broke sharply, bumping with Navajo as the field surged forward. He found his rhythm quickly, settling just off the pace set by Shecky Greene. Pinkai's hands were steady, but he could feel the tension in the reins. The colt's jaw worked against the bit, the metallic taste of blood constant. Every breath, every swallow, reminded Sham of the morning's injury. Still, he pressed on, his stride unbroken. Through the first half mile, the pace was honest but not reckless. Shecky Greene held the lead, but Sham stalked, never more than a length away. At the 3/4 pole, Sham's strength began to show. He surged past a fading Shecky Greene, claiming the lead as the field turned for home. For a moment, the Derby belonged to him. Pinkay could feel the power beneath him, the colt's massive heart driving him forward. The crowd sensed it too. A California outsider, bleeding and battered, was about to steal the crown, but the shadow loomed. Secretariat, who had trailed the field early, began his move on the outside. In the final quarter mile, the 2 colts drew even. For nearly 400 yards, they ran side by side, matching each other stride for stride. It was not just a race, it was a war of wills, 2 engines built for greatness refusing to yield. Pinkay called on everything Sham had. The colt responded, fighting through pain, matching the red giant with every bound. The track record, 1 minute 59 2/5 seconds, hung in the air, but neither horse seemed to care. They were locked in their own private battle. In the final 100 yards, Secretariat inched ahead. Sham's head bobbed, blood flecking his chest, but his stride never faltered. He crossed the finish line 2.5 lengths behind, 8 lengths clear of the rest. The official time for Sham was 1 minute 59 4/5 seconds. Only Secretariat had ever run faster. That time would have won the Derby in 1970, 1971, 1972, 1974, 1975. Nearly every running in history up to that point, and all but one for the next quarter century. Yet on this day, it was only good enough for second. The record books would remember Secretariat's victory. The headlines would celebrate the new champion. But the Derby chart tells another story. A colt who lost teeth, ran with a bleeding mouth, and still shattered the old record. In the winner's circle, Pinkay dismounted, silent, his hands streaked with blood from the reins. Sham stood tall, chest heaving, eyes wild but unbroken. The pain was real, but so was the achievement. He had given everything and more, only to find himself in the shadow of a legend. As the crowd drifted away and the photographers packed up, Sham's team knew what they had witnessed. He had run the race of his life, and still the stopwatch refused to grant him immortality. The toll of this day would not fade quickly. For Sham, the derby was not just a loss, it was the beginning of heartbreak, a wound deeper than any cut, carried forward to the next battle. Pimlico Racecourse, May 19, 1973. The Preakness Stakes drew a different blueprint. Frank Pancho Martin, still simmering from Kentucky, wanted a new approach. He told Laffit Pincay Jr. that they would not let him get away. The plan was to shadow Secretariat, to match him stride for stride and deny the red horse any daylight. There would be no waiting, no stalking from a distance. This time, Sham would not let the legend slip by untouched. The gates snapped open. Secretariat dropped to the rear, as if content to let the others set the pace. But on the first turn, something wild happened. Secretariat exploded from last, surging past the entire field in a single breathtaking move. Sham, locked onto his rival, went with him. The two colts rocketed past the pack, separating themselves by a full 10 lengths before the field even realized what was happening. It was a match race in everything but name, 2 athletes alone, the rest trailing far behind. Through the backstretch, the crowd's roar built with every stride. Secretariat and Sham ran as if bound by an invisible tether, neither willing to yield. Pincay felt the power beneath him, Sham's muscles bunching and releasing in perfect rhythm. For a moment, the plan seemed to work. At the mile marker, Sham edged forward, his nose in front, but the effort was immense. Secretariat, relentless, drew even and then began to inch away. The final turn became a test of limits. Pincay called for more, but Sham's reserves were thinning. He had emptied himself in the derby, and now, less than 2 weeks later, he was being asked to do it again. Secretariat surged clear, stretching the gap to 2.5 lengths at the wire. Sham crossed next, alone in second, 10 lengths ahead of the rest. The stopwatch meant to record history failed. The official teletimer malfunctioned, leaving only hand-timed estimates. Years later, forensic analysis would confirm that Secretariat ran the Preakness in 1:53 flat, a new record. Sham's own time, just over 1:53 2/5, would have shattered every previous Preakness mark except for the one set that day. As the horses slowed to a walk, Pincay sat motionless in the saddle. He later said he could feel Sham's heart break. 2 races, 2 superhuman efforts, and nothing to show for it but second place. The colt's flanks heaved, sweat darkening his nearly black coat. The crowd cheered for Secretariat, but in the quiet that followed, the cost became clear. Sham had run faster than almost any horse in the history of the Preakness. He had chased the impossible, and the chase had taken something from him. Back at the barn, Martin and Summer tried to hide their disappointment. The plan had been sound, the execution fearless. But Secretariat had rewritten the rules again. For Sham, the weight of those 2 defeats settled deep. He had given everything, and the world had barely noticed. The scoreboard showed another second place, but the real loss was harder to measure, a champion's spirit battered by the pursuit of a shadow that could not be caught. The Preakness did not break Sham's body. It broke something inside. The next move would be desperate. A gamble born of heartbreak and the belief that only total commitment could topple a giant. The road to Belmont would not offer mercy. It would demand more than even an 18-pound heart could give. Belmont Park, June 9, 1973. The strategy was written in desperation. Pancho Martin pulled Laffit Pincay aside and gave him a single instruction. Send Sham to the front, force Secretariat to chase, and never look back. The gates flew open, and Sham burst forward, driving through the opening quarter in 23 3/5 seconds, a sprinter's tempo, not a stayer's. The half came up in 46 1/5 seconds. Those numbers carved into the official chart echo with warning. No horse had ever survived that kind of early speed at 1.5 miles. Down the backstretch, Sham's ears pinned flat, legs churning, he matched Secretariat stride for stride. The two colts tore away from the field, the gap stretching to nearly 20 lengths. For a moment, it looked like a match race on the edge of reason, two rivals locked in a private war, the rest left in another world entirely. Pincay could feel the power underneath him, the engine that had carried Shams so far. But the price was mounting with every stride. After 6 furlongs, the toll became visible. Shams' breathing turned ragged. The stride that once seemed endless began to shorten. Secretariat, relentless, drew up alongside. The duel became a rout. As the red horse powered ahead, Shams' legs grew heavy. The field, once distant, closed in. One by one, they swept past. Shams finished last, trailing by 31 lengths, his head low, his body spent from exhaustion. The chart tells the story in numbers: 23 3/5, 46 1/5, a 20-length lead, and then the collapse. No injury was visible, no dramatic fall, just exhaustion, pure and simple. Shams had gambled everything on the front end and paid the price. The race that was meant to break Secretariat instead broke the only horse who dared to try. The walk back to the barn was silent, the weight of the moment hanging over horse and team alike. Veterinarians at Belmont Park gathered around Shams in the quiet days after the race, searching for answers. He had walked off the track exhausted, his head low, sweat streaking his nearly black coat. At first, the team blamed the collapse on the punishing pace and the toll of 3 grueling races in 5 weeks. But Shams' stride was off. He favored his left foreleg, moving with a subtle hitch that had not been there before. Frank Martin insisted on a full examination. X-rays revealed a hairline fracture in the cannon bone, a long load-bearing bone in the lower leg, vital for every stride. The diagnosis landed like a punch. Shams had not simply run himself empty in the Belmont, he had done it on a compromised leg. The break likely began as a stress fracture, invisible and silent, made catastrophic by the relentless duel with Secretariat. Surgery was the only option. The veterinary team devised a plan to stabilize the bone. Shams was sedated. The fracture set and reinforced with surgical screws. The procedure was risky, but the colt's strong constitution worked in his favor. Recovery would take months, with strict stall rest and careful monitoring. Martin, never one for sentiment, sat beside Shams' stall most evenings, watching the big colt doze under the dim barn lights. There was no talk of retirement. The team believed in his resilience. For them, the Belmont was no longer a story of defeat. It was the story of a horse who had fought the greatest of all time, stride for stride, while racing on a broken leg. News of the injury filtered through the racing world, reframing the narrative. The collapse at Belmont was not a surrender, but an act of courage. Shams had given everything his body could offer, and more. As the months passed, the legend grew, not of a horse that faded, but of one who had risked everything in pursuit of greatness and paid for it in silence. Months of stall rest followed the Belmont. Shams' world shrank to the quiet of the barn, to the measured steps of grooms and the daily routines that replaced the roar of a grandstand. Frank Martin and Sigmund Sommer refused to let defeat or exhaustion write the final chapter. Under careful supervision, Shams' leg was given time to heal. Each week the colt grew stronger, his appetite returning, his eyes regaining their old spark. By early 1974, the whispers began. Shams was galloping again, and he looked every bit the athlete who had once chased history. The Volante handicap at Santa Anita offered a rare second act. Shams was entered against a field of seasoned runners, and the weight assignments reflected his reputation. He carried more than any rival, a badge of respect and a burden at once. The gates opened, and the old stride returned. Shams surged to the front, his legs eating up the ground in long, fluid arcs. He set a pace that dared the others to follow, and none could answer. By the final turn, the lead had stretched to daylight. He crossed the wire alone, ears pricked, as if the months of silence had been nothing more than a pause. The victory was decisive, the kind that rekindled old hopes and drew nods from even the most skeptical railbirds. But the comeback was fleeting. In the weeks after the Volante, Sham's training intensified, his handlers pushing to see how much was left in the tank. During a routine workout, something went wrong. Sham pulled up short, favoring his leg. The diagnosis was swift and final. Breakdown in the same leg that had been so carefully nursed back to health. There would be no more races, no more comebacks. The decision to retire was made not in anger or regret, but with a quiet recognition of limits. Sham returned to the farm, his days as a competitor over. The curtain fell not with a headline, but with the quiet dignity of a champion who had given everything and asked for nothing in return. There are racehorses who win immortality by crossing the wire first, and there are those whose greatness is measured by what science finds beneath the skin. In the years after Sham's final race, the question lingered: how could a horse run so fast, so often, and still be remembered as a runner-up? The answer lies in the engine that powered him, a heart so large it bordered on the mythic. When veterinarians at Woolmac Farm performed Sham's necropsy in 1993, they found a heart weighing 18 pounds. That figure stands as a biological marvel, more than double the size of the average thoroughbreds. In the world of equine physiology, such an organ means more than just size. It means a capacity to move oxygen, to fuel muscle, to recover from exertion in ways ordinary horses cannot. The term super heart is not a romantic flourish, but a technical reality. A rare trait that explains how Sham could chase Secretariat through record-breaking fractions and still finish clear of the rest. This advantage, though, is a double-edged sword. A heart that large promises stamina and speed, but it also brings risks. An engine built for greatness, always running hot. When Sham died of a heart attack at age 23, the legacy of that oversized heart became both his badge and his burden. For decades, racing fans and scientists alike have debated the role of genetics, the mysterious X factor passed through certain bloodlines that can produce such outliers. Sham's heart, measured and weighed, stands as living proof that biology sometimes gives its greatest gifts to more than one competitor in the same generation. Yet the paradox endures. Alydar, the rival who chased affirmed and lost 3 Triple Crown races by a nose, is remembered for his persistence, his refusal to yield. Statues and documentaries keep his story alive. Sham, who ran faster than Alydar ever did, is mostly a footnote. The stopwatch and the autopsy both tell us he was extraordinary. History prefers the narrative of the one who kept coming back. But every legend needs an anvil, a force that tempers and sharpens the blade. Without Sham, the record set by Secretariat might never have been written. He was the rival who forced a god to run faster than any horse before or since. In the shadow of that red giant, Sham's greatness is not erased, only misunderstood. A champion whose heart was as vast as the injustice of being born in the wrong year. In racing, history rarely honors the runner-up, yet greatness often hides in the shadow of legends. Today, countless talents in every field are measured against impossible standards, their own records overlooked. The story of Sham reminds us, sometimes the difference between forgotten and immortal is not ability, but timing. We still write history with a stopwatch, rarely with a fair measure. What stories are we missing just beyond the finish line? Share your thoughts below.